Last part of the homework was to actually build the list itself in its own function. What information, if we wrote this function, which we will, function renderList, what information would it need in order to build that list? What would it need from the outside? Again, renderList doesn't know anything about the form. That's handleSubmit's job. What does renderList need to know? It needs that user object, right? Because it needs all the labels and all the values. But I think that's all it needs. And really, it doesn't matter to it that it's a user. It's just some piece of data. It's just some object containing some data. So I'm going to try to write it that way. So let's write for the function we want, not the function we have. How would we like this to work? What would we like to change here? I kind of wish I could just basically say append child renderList user and get rid of all the rest of that. That's how I'd like it to work. So let's try to do that. So if this gets some data, I want it to build a bunch of list items out of that. It's going to need to create the element, right? It's going to need to create the list. And then for whatever data was passed in there, it's going to get the keys, loop over them, and render a list item for each one. Now inside this function, I refer to it as data, not user. Because it doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it has keys and values. So change it there, change it here. And then, of course, we need to make sure that it actually returns the list when we're finished, right? Forget all this for right now. Let's just see if this function works as it is. Never mind that those even are users. They're just key value pairs as far as we're concerned. Let's see if it works. So let's say let's refresh the page, of course. Const meals. What you have for breakfast, Gabby?
A granola bar.
Granola bar. Maddie, what's for lunch? A what now? Chia? Really? Yeah. Chia bar. We're having lots of bars. What's for dinner, Jack? Twammiches. I'm going to put that comma in there because I like to put the comma in there. All right. Got this object of meals. Now what if I say render list meals? I get back a UL with the list item that says breakfast, granola bar, lunch, chia bar, dinner, twammiches. Groovy. Our function works. So it seems that back down in handleSubmit, I could just put renderList in here, right? I could save it to a variable first if I wanted to. Maybe we want to do that. Const list equals renderList. And the data is right here in user. And then we just append child list. Now look how short handle submit is. It's taking the data from the form and building an object out of it. And then it's just rendering a list. We don't care how rendering the list works. That's a job for another function. Again, writing little functions like this that work on its own also makes it much easier to test. Look how easy it was to test render list. It wasn't coupled to the form. It works completely independently of the form. It just takes any old object and it'll build a list out of that. So if we wanted to actually write automated tests for the sake of figuring out whether we broke something when we make further changes, having nice little functions like this makes that much, much easier to do. And since we're always going to try to break problems down, it's kind of easier to write it this way anyway. Because if you describe what this entire thing does, it's kind of complicated. But just building the list item, not that complicated. Just building the list, not that complicated. It's tying it together where it starts to get a little complicated. But if you break it down into little pieces like this, it's not too bad. We just need to get used to things like working with objects. And pretty soon it'll become second nature. So we've saved this. Let's refresh, see if it all works. Eamon, what's your favorite color? Orange. Rodrigo, what's your favorite color? It's nice, isn't it? Very vibrant. You have good taste. All right. Cool. Homework done. And not once did we resort to inner HTML. Oh, that's right. We're using this thing now. Extract render list function. Push it real good and done. Questions so far?